Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Elective 1 session on advanced case law research. My name is Professor Ashley Arrington. I'm excited to be here with you today. I hope you will forgive my voice. I have been under the weather for far too long, but let's go ahead and get started. As you'll recall from our LP legal research workshops, we've got two factors that are important in helping us to determine whether a case is mandatory or binding, right? So this should be review for you. So first is jurisdiction, right? Are we in a state court, federal court? But then also the level of court, right? Thinking about the hierarchy of the court system. So are we in a trial low-level court, right? Are we in an intermediate level appellate court? Or are we in our court of last resort, right? Which at the federal level would be our Supreme Court. At the state level, Texas is a little bit different, right? In that we've got two courts of last resort, right? We've got the Supreme Court of Texas as well as the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, right? The intermediate appellate level, federal and Texas respectively, we've got the U.S. Courts of Appeal and then the Courts of Appeals of Texas, right? And then again, federal and Texas respectively at that low level. Trial court level, we've got our U.S. district courts and then our Texas district or trial courts, right? So something to be keeping in mind when you're choosing case law. Are you seeking out that mandatory or binding case law first, right? You want to find that mandatory or binding case law to use as part of your argument and your work product, right? And then move on to persuasive, right? So when would we use persuasive authority, right? So sometimes we'll come across we'll find that there is sufficient mandatory or binding authority that we can use, right? That's great. Okay, that's not always going to be the case, right? A lot of times, I keep saying often or a lot of times, it just depends really, right? So sometimes you may find that there's not enough mandatory authority on point, or there really isn't any mandatory authority on point for the issue of law that you're looking at, right? So that's an instance in which you are going to need more persuasive authority to use in building your argument, right? You may find that mandatory authority is sufficient and that's all that you need. Maybe you feel like you need just a little bit more, so you want to add in some persuasive authority as well, right? What are some other instances in which you might use persuasive authority, right? So there's a gap in the law, which we mentioned, right, where there's not binding authority on point. That means no relevant binding law in your jurisdiction, right? You're going to have to look to other jurisdictions. Public policy might be something that you consider as well, right? You might use persuasive authority when you're trying to build a public policy argument. Before we go further, I do want to point to some of these basic terms within the law and legal research that I hope you're familiar with, but if not, just want to give you a reminder of these things, right? So, reporters, these are the books that are housing our full case opinions, right? They are housing them in chronological order and by jurisdiction, right? So we've got different reporters depending on what jurisdiction we're in. When you see that U.S. citation, you're looking at the U.S. reporter, right? When you see that SW citation, you're looking at the Southwestern reporter, right? Which is where our Texas cases will be housed. Some states have their own state-specific reporters. Texas is not one of them, right? But then when you pull these cases up by citations, you are seeing the full case opinion on Lexis or Westlaw, whatever it is that you're using. But if you were to look at them in print, right, that's what they would be housed in, is a book, a print reporter. You're still using that citation, though, to find those cases online, right? So what is a digest? Okay, so digests are something that researchers used in print historically, right? Digests are summarizing areas of law and then organizing areas of law by those topics, right? Using those summarizations to identify the topic and then organize by that topic or area of law. So, although we don't really have formal digests anymore, digests are essentially just an indexing or classification system, right? So, we're still using these indexing systems, whereas traditionally, historically, the digests are organizing these things in print, still an indexing or categorization system, looking at different topic areas. Now we're just seeing that online, right? And we can use those indexing systems to navigate and filter case law more efficiently. So we'll see that when we look at our in-class exercise and some of the tools that we can use for locating relevant case law. But again, they're just newer extensions, right? This old digest system is now translated to a digital platform, but it is still the same type of indexing system where you are categorizing areas of law by topic area, right? Okay, so thinking back again to our LP research workshops during 1L, we talked about 4 different ways that you can identify relevant case law. So first we said citation, right? That's going to be super easy. That's great if you have a citation that you can go directly to. Sometimes you have that citation because you've done prior research and you're coming back to it, right? Other times, for some reason, your supervisor is handing you a citation. Now, I'm going to tell you in practice, that's not likely going to be the case, okay? You're going to be seeking out case law from a small set of facts or scenario in which you're determining what the relevant case law or issue will be, and then finding the case laws that are specific to that issue, right? So citation is super easy, not likely going to be the case in practice. Same thing with party name. Super easy, right? If you know the party names, now this is going to work better for if it's a more unique name, not Johnson or Smith, right? Because if you're typing in those party names, that's all you have. That's an abundance of information to work through. Not really the best approach to do that, right, when you're using these more popular names. But it is an option for those more specific names, and it can be helpful, right? But those are not going to be our focus today because that's generally not what you're working with in practice, right? So what we're generally working with is our find one good case method, right? We've found one good case already. We just need one thing to work from in order to get us started and get us moving. Okay, so once you find that case, you've got a whole host of tools that you can use to find other relevant cases. And those tools are built from this indexing system or our citator system. Our citator system is the indexing system on these online platforms, right? We're going to focus more on that today. We talked briefly about advanced searching in our research workshops, which is our keyword searching and our Boolean terms and connector searching, right? So keyword is pretty straightforward, not really always the best method. Boolean terms and connector searching is really just practice, getting familiar with what those terms and connectors are on each of your respective research platforms and understanding how the database reads and processes those queries. But again, our focus is really on the one good case method, right? So you can see here with our image, you found a good case. However you've gotten to that previous research, you're using something that you found already. A supervisor has given you something to work from. You found just one good case that's relevant to the topic area. And then you have all of these many tools that you can work from to build on your research, right? So we've got our head notes. We'll talk about that in a moment. Using the head notes to get to other relevant cases. You could look through the parties' filings. You're looking through each and every part of the case, right? The case history, key numbers, that's more specific to the Westlaw platform, right? But you could use topics on either Westlaw or Lexis. We're talking about Shepardizing and key citing, right? Those are our citator systems. So looking to our Shepard's report or our key cite report. And then you see this pro tip here, right? Narrowing within those big data sets. So once you use your citator to look at your Shepard's report or your key cite report, you've got way too many results. How are you going to filter through those results? You look at left to use your filters. There is a search within filter, and then you can use a keyword or Boolean terms and connector search to search within those results. Table of authorities, what is that? Those are the authorities that whatever case you're looking at has relied upon, right? So you can look to those cases. We don't see citing references here or other citing sources here, but those are things that we could use as well, right? What are the cases that have cited our case? What are the other sources, whether codified law, secondary sources, whatever it is that have cited to our case that can help us get to relevant case law or other law? Again, we've got so many tools to work from, and this is really just a really beautiful gift. I know that sounds nerdy. Yes, I am a research librarian, but really it is a beautiful gift and something that researchers did not have in the past, right? So just be thankful that these research attorneys and these attorney editors have done all of the work of indexing this case law for you so that you can use these tools to get to other relevant pieces of law. Okay, so for review purposes, what are head notes, right? So we know that head notes are summaries of a point of law, right? They are going to appear at the top of a case. They're drafted by attorney editors. Now, as we move into this new AI world, right, these head notes are sometimes drafted by AI tools, right? So they're reading through a case. They're pulling what pieces of areas of law are being discussed within a case, and then they're summarizing those points of law, right? And then they're putting them at the top of the case so that we can use them as researchers to get to other relevant case law. So are you citing to a head note? No, right? You are not citing to the head note. You are using it as a research tool, again, to get to other relevant pieces of law, other relevant case law that you can use in your research to build your argument and your ultimate work product, right? So what are key numbers? We said that key numbers are specific to Westlaw, right? There will be key numbers that are tied to topics and the head notes that we're seeing. Once again, it's just that classification indexing system for U.S. law, right? Once again, developed by attorney editors. And you can use this in the same way, right? As a tool to move further in your research. So what about annotations, notes of decisions? So when we say annotations, we just mean notes, right? So we just mean notes that are providing context or references to other relevant sources, right? You can see those in a couple of different ways. They could appear in the document itself, right? Summarizing the cases or summarizing other related materials, codified law, right? They could appear in our citator tabs, which is again that indexing system, right? So as we saw, what we talked about with our citing references or our other citing sources, how these laws and cases treated the case that we're looking at now. Has it been negative? Has it been positive? Is it neutral? And how are we going to use that to further our research and to build an appropriate argument? Right? So annotations can mean multiple different things. Notes of decisions, right? The summaries of cases that help to interpret or apply a specific piece of codified law. So a specific statute, specific regulation, it's going to appear directly below the text of the statute or regulation that you're looking at. And again, it shows using that case how courts in a specific instance have interpreted and applied that law. It is similar to a headnote. How? It's a summarization of a point of law from a case, right? Now, how is it different from a headnote? It is more specific than a headnote in that it specifically touches codified law, right? Again, it is a summarization of a point of law from a case that has sought to interpret a piece of codified law, whether statute, regulation, court rule, whatever it is, right? You're seeing notes of decisions that are still summarizations of case law, but they are specific to cases that have sought to interpret codified law. Now, we also talked about advanced keyword searching. So, natural language searching, what do we mean by that? It's like you're typing in just a freehand search as you would in Google, right? Now, when is that helpful? You need an overview, right? You don't even know really what the terminology is, and you're just doing an initial search and seeing what comes up and trying to get a better idea of what the legal terminology looks like. Or you're not getting results with terms and connectors. Generally, you're going to start with your natural language searching. Well, let's back up. Generally, you're going to start with your indexing, your citator tools, right? Your one good case method. You're going to use that before you go to natural language searching. But if you are not using natural language searching, or you've tried terms and connectors, you're not getting results there, you might come back to natural language searching. Or you might use natural language, identify some of the more specific language, whether it's legal or more straightforward, that is still used within the case law, and use that approach. Now, with terms and connector searching, you are in control of the algorithm, right? But that means that you do have to have an understanding of how the specific database is reading and processing the query that you're putting in it, right? So if you're using /s within a certain sentence, or you're using the truncation exclamation point for pulling various endings of a word, you're understanding how the database is reading those things, right? And knowing that you may have to have, depending on what you have access to, right? You might work for a major firm that provides access to Westlaw and Lexis. Not super likely, but you may have that gift, right? And if you have that gift, you want to know how each platform is reading those terms and connectors. How do they differ, right? What does the space look like on Westlaw versus Lexis? Is the space standing for an or? Is the space standing for an and? You are using these terms and connectors to search for patterns, right? You can do /3/12. I'm looking for this first word within 5 or 7 words within this next word, because you know that these two words are going to be closely to within a certain number of words, right? Alternatives, that's when you're using your truncation. Proximity between words, right? Parts of a document, you can use TI colon and search a word to search for a specific word within a title. Okay, this is the best method for searching within a document. Again, this is just practice, practice, practice. I can't really tell you anything other than you've got to practice to understand what these terms and connectors look like and how they're processed. So let me point you again to where you can find those on each of Lexis and Westlaw so that you know what to come back to and continue to practice using this tool. So here we're looking at Westlaw, just the main page, right? So we're going to move into search tips right here next to the search line bar. So we just click there, and this is what we'll see. So you can click on the Boolean Terms and Connectors tab here at left, and they'll give us a list of what their terms and connectors look like, right? So on Lexis, it's much the same, right? We're at our main page here. We can click into Advanced Search. This is what we'll see, right? The use connectors are listed at right. A friendly reminder that you can use this search everything function to practice building your queries, right? So you can put in all of these terms, any of these terms, you type that in, it'll start to build your query up top in this search bar. And that's one way that you can start to gain familiarity with how those queries are built, right? So that you can do that on your own later. At the bottom here, click on View All Connectors and Commands. This is what you'll see. It'll take you to Alexa's help page, and you can see we've got search connectors. How do I search in specific segments, such as title, attorney, you want to search by attorney name, judge, search by judge name, how do I create a search, etc. So we've got helpful links for all of these. I'm going to click on search connectors here, and this is what I see. So I see again the operators listed, but then I also see the connector priority, the order of operators, right? So in what order is the database processing these connectors, right? And that's going to vary based on database. It is very similar on Westlaw and Lexis, but there are differences. So you always want to make sure that you have an understanding of which of those connectors is processed first, right? Because the way that you think that the database is reading the query might not necessarily be the way that the database is actually reading your query. And again, that is just something that comes with time and practice. One more friendly reminder when we're doing case law research, right? We want to make sure that we validate our case law, right? But kind of building on that, we've talked about citators, right? So citators have multiple purposes, right? So we've talked about citators as these indexing tools, looking at citing references, table of authorities, whatever it is, to get to other relevant case law or other relevant sources of law. But that's not the only function for a citator, right? You use citators to also validate your case law, and then as well to validate codified law. So like with statutes, like with regulations, codified law, right, you have to use the citators to ensure that the cases you rely on are still good law, right? So on Westlaw, you've got flags. On Lexis, you've got signals, and you're going to use those tools to ensure that a case is still good law. That does not mean that you see a red flag or a red signal and start running, right? You have to dig deeper and seek to understand what point of law does that flag or symbol apply. And do you care about that point of law, right? You're looking at a case in a specific point of law, Is that flag even touching the point of law with which you're concerned? Does it even matter for your research purposes, right? So let's do a basic reminder of how to get to these flags and symbols. So I'm just looking at a case here on Westlaw, and then I've got this Powered by Keysight tab up top. So I'm going to click there, and this is what I see. Right? I see a list of what these flags mean. They can mean different things for cases versus statutes versus patents, right? So different things for case law or codified law, right? So that's important to remember too. But that's where you can come to give yourself that reminder of what those Keysight flags stand for. On Lexis, again, just looking at a case here, I can do a couple of things. So I can click on Shepardized Document here, and that'll take me here to our Citing Decisions tab. If you scroll down just a little bit, you can click on Legend here, and this is what you'll see, right? It'll give you your signal indicators to tell you what those signals mean. You could also click citing references rather than clicking on Shepardized Document. It's going to take you to the same place. Again, you'll see that Legend link, and then once you click Legend, you'll see the same thing. But remember, again, as we said, when you see that indicator, you're digging further, right? You're digging into how and where that specific negative treatment or positive treatment applies, right? Doesn't matter for your research purposes. Let's look at our in-class exercise, and the first question points us to Westlaw. So we'll use Westlaw for this question. And in this question, we were given the citation. Now we found that citation through Texas jurisprudence, right? We understand the importance of starting with secondary sources, and our trusty Texas jurisprudence, which is our Texas encyclopedia, points us to that case, right? So we've just pulled this citation, entered it into the top search bar, and here we are on our case page. So then our question says, which headnote number discusses what types of evidence and proof you need to grant divorce on fault grounds? So if you were doing this research and you didn't know what headnote you're looking for, you would simply scroll through your headnotes and you would be looking for a relevant headnote, right? The question here tells us what kind of headnote we're looking for. So in this instance, I'm going to do Command F just because that's easier. But I type in the word evidence, and I've got 126 results. So maybe I try something different. So now I use Command F, and I search the word proof. I've got only 3 results, okay? So let's follow that. So I see headnote 17 tells us adultery for purposes of granting divorce on fault grounds can be shown by direct or circumstantial evidence. However, there must be clear and positive proof, and mere suggestion and innuendo are insufficient, right? So, we found the relevant headnote. Our next part of the question says, pop down to the part of the opinion discussing the issues in this headnote. What case does the court cite to for the definition of adultery? So we can just simply click 17 here, headnote 17. When we do that, it's going to take us down to the part of the discussion with headnote 17. Okay, so this particular paragraph has the points related to headnote 15, 16, and 17. Ours is the definition of adultery, right? So adultery means the voluntary sexual intercourse of a married person with one not the spouse. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. And then we see NRA SAA, and then also Ayala v. Ayala. Okay, so those are our two cases that help with that specific definition. Then we're asked, are either of the cases from the Court of Appeals for Texas in Amarillo? But we can see the jurisdiction already linked in these cases, right? So NRA SAA is coming from Appeals Court in Dallas. Ayala is coming from Appeals Court in Houston. So the answer is no, right? Neither of them are coming from Amarillo. Next question. What topic and key numbers are found in the relevant headnote you found in 1A? So we're going to look to 17 again. If we click on 17, that takes us right back up to where headnote 17 is, right above the case. And then we see a list of topics and key numbers that write. So our topics get more and more specific as we move down. Our key numbers get more and more specific as we move down. We've got two key numbers that are relevant here. Following the K, right? 129, 1, and then we've got 129, 9. So if I want to find other cases that are relative to 129, 1 or degree of proof, I can click here on 129, 1. We're looking for Amarillo cases in this instance, right? So now I've clicked on 129, 1, and now I'm seeing a list of cases that have been assigned that same key number. Okay, and then I narrow by jurisdiction at left. I can see a list of the Court of Appeals. We've got Houston, San Antonio, Dallas, El Paso. None of those are Amarillo, right? So with respect to that first key number, degree of proof, no, right? None of those coming from Amarillo. But we'll go back, right? That was our first one. Now we're going to move to key number 129, 9, specific to circumstantial evidence. So we do the same thing here, right? We'll click on that key number. That will take us to a list of cases that have been assigned that same key number. If we look at left, same thing, we can narrow by jurisdiction, right? We can look at Texas Courts of Appeals. We can see we've got cases coming from 1st, 2nd, 4th, 5th, and 8th Courts of Appeals. None of those are Amarillo, right? So again, that second key number, 129, 9, also no cases coming out of Amarillo. Then our question asks about Supreme Court cases. You can see, looking from jurisdiction here, there is one case that's coming from the Texas Supreme Court. So if we were to click there on that Supreme Court case, it will narrow for us, and we can see that that case is McCullough versus McCullough. So there is a Supreme Court case that's relevant, and again, that came from filtering within under jurisdiction and into Texas Supreme Court. The next question asks us whether there's other relevant key numbers. So there's a couple ways that we can go about this. So let's say we've chosen 129.1, that's relevant. So we can click there. And then if we use the drop down on left key number, we can click from divorce, get more and more specific, right? We're moving from into more and more specific key numbers, 129. We can keep going from there, right? And then we see our subsections, 0.5, 1, 11. So now we're just scrolling through these to determine other key numbers that are relevant that we might want to look into, right? So is degree of proof relevant for us? Circumstances, is that relevant to us? Moving down further, suspicious or compromising circumstances, occupancy of same room or bed, are those relevant key numbers, right? So that's just another way that we can get to potentially other relevant key numbers. We can also start from the main page, and you can see key numbers here under content types. You can click on key numbers You could follow that way as well. So we'd click first into divorce topic, right? Our number's 134. And then we can get more specific, right? We can move into adultery, right? 26 here. And we can see cases that have been assigned that topic and key number there, right? So multiple ways to find other relevant key numbers and thus other relevant cases. Let's move into our next question on the in-class exercise, and that is question 2, which tells us that we'll be using lexes. So we're starting from the same place, right? We've found that citation, so we've just entered our citation from the main page, and this has taken us directly to the case. Now our question asks, which headnote talks about the type of evidence needed to show adultery? So again, you could scroll, if you didn't know what headnote you were looking for, right, in practice, you would be scrolling through headnotes in order to identify which headnote or multiple headnotes are relevant, right? But our law school question, right, tells us what the headnote says, right? So types of evidence needed to show adultery. So when I type in evidence, again, we see 102 results come up. So that's probably not the best way to search for the relevant headnote, right? Given that we've got 102 results, let's see what else we could use in order to narrow. So now I'm going to do types. We're looking for types of evidence, right? I use the word types. There's only 2 results, so that's easy for me to scroll through. And then I see headnote 7, which is indeed relevant to the types of evidence. And it tells us that a trial court may grant a divorce in favor of one spouse if the other spouse has committed adultery, gives us the definition of adultery, tells us how adultery can be shown, right? So if I were to click on adultery, we've got our headnote 7, right, types of evidence, and then above we have our line of topics. So as we move along, we get more and more specific, right? Types of evidence, circumstantial evidence, dissolution and divorce, fault-based grounds, and then adultery, right? We can click Get Documents once we click that down arrow. And then this is what we see, right? Additional cases that are specific to that adultery topic. Our question also asks us whether any of those opinions are coming from the 7th Court of Appeals in Amarillo, right? So now we've used our filters at left, and we can see that there are some cases from 7th Court of Appeals in Amarillo, 5 cases, right? So we can narrow there, and then we see our list of cases from that jurisdiction, right? And then in order to find out which is most recent, we can just sort by date at right? Newest to oldest. We see our most recent case is In Re Marriage of Hottinger. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but that is our most recent case coming from 7th Court of Appeals in Amarillo. So coming back to our case, right, main case page here. Now our question is going to ask us to find the headnote related to the types of evidence used to show adultery. So we found that, right? We found our types of evidence, and then adultery means the voluntary sexual intercourse, yada yada. So we found that headnote. Now we're going to click on that headnote, and it's going to take us down once again to the part of the the part of the opinion that is relative to that headnote, right? So We see the definition, adultery means the voluntary sexual intercourse of a married person with one, not the spouse. And then we see the case that provides us that definition, right, which is Gerges v. Gerges, coming from El Paso. If I were to click on Headnote 3 within that opinion, it'll take me right back up to the headnote, right? So you can toggle back and forth between the headnote and the part of the opinion that is discussing the point of law that is summarized in that headnote. Our next question tells us that our partner recalls a case from involving parties with the names Dharma and Han, right? So all I've done here is type in those names. Because they're not super popular names, we see a case that comes up, and we can click on that case. Now again, this isn't going to work if you have like Johnson or Smith, right? Brown, whatever popular name it is, because you're going to get so many results that arise from that it's just not going to make sense. So sometimes the party name search method makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. But in this case, it helps us, right? We can indeed confirm that it is from the 5th District Court of Appeals in Dallas, which is what our partner told us where our partner told us it was from. And then our question says, find the headnote related to no fault grounds for divorce, and ask where the language from that headnote comes from. So I've just Command F no fault. As it turns out, there's only 2 results, so that's really easy to narrow. We can move into Headnote 7, which is indeed relative to no fault grounds. And then it tells us that the court can grant a divorce without regard to fault if the marriage has become insupportable because of discord or conflict, yada yada. So this is no fault grounds as an example of when a marriage could be terminated, right? That language is coming specifically from the Texas Family Code, Section 6.001. Okay, so in this instance, Headnote 7, this language is coming directly from a statutory code section. That is not to say that headnotes are always going to come from a specific codified law section, right? So in this instance, it made sense to use the statutory code section language for this headnote because that's precisely what issue is at point here. But other times, most times, right, we're using attorney editors, research attorneys, or AI nowadays that are drafting these summaries and putting these headnotes together. Now, what if you want to cite to this statutory code section? You will not cite to the headnote, right? We don't cite to headnotes. We're going to cite to the statutory code section itself, and that's how you would cite that language, right? Next piece asks us to use the headnote to pop down to the part of the opinion related to this issue. So, of course, we would click on Headnote 7. That takes us down to the part of the discussion relative to Headnote 7. And then it asks us what case is cited. We've got to scroll down a little bit to get to a specific case, and then we find In Re ABP. And so that's our final answer for that in-class exercise. And then once again, as we said, if you click that Headnote 7, it takes us right up to the Headnote itself, right? So you can toggle back and forth, which is really helpful to you in your research process. Thank you all so much for your time today. Thank you for bearing with me while I'm not feeling my best and do not have a clear voice. I hope this has been helpful in reviewing some of the concepts that we talked about in the LP research workshops. I hope it's been helpful in highlighting to you the many tools that you have access to that will help you to further your research. If you have questions about anything covered here today or anything related to the final assessment, please feel free to reach out, ashley.arrington@ttu.edu. I'm always happy to hear from you. Thank you again, and I look forward to viewing your final assessments. Thanks. Bye-bye.